You're checking out the Investor Shed podcast with Nick Beveridge and Jeremy Kitchen. They're on the path to financial freedom and they're taking their community with them. Stay tuned for the best free real estate investing advice on the internet.
Welcome to the Investor Shed podcast. My name is Nick Beveridge, and this is Season 2, Episode 15, with the man of the minute, Jeremy Dwelling Kitchen. How are you?
Nick, I'm doing so great. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I'm not in the V-shirt club like you yet. V-neck shirt?
Yeah. You're noticing the cut of my shirt rather than the color this time. That's an interesting choice. Why aren't you in the V-neck club?
Well, I haven't been lifting weights long enough, but been working on it. Getting ripped. I figure I got another 6 months, and then maybe I'll order my V-necks. What do you think?
I love it. I think that'll be good. We'll have a V-neck party for you because V-necks are all the rage. Speaking of all the rage, we got Xavier Marin on the show today. Xavier Marin's really awesome. He's one of the hosts of the W2 Amigos podcast. He goes into a story about house hacking and moving and how he continues to keep his W2 job while investing in real estate. Really cool stuff. Anything you want to add to that, Nick?
That's right. No, this man is awesome. He's got some good partnerships going on. You're going to want to stick around and listen to, basically, he's like a celebrity that this guy works with. So yeah, go, grab some chips, grab some cheese, microwave it on a plate, and sit back, relax. Don't forget the jalapenos. Check it out. All right, welcome to the Investor Shed podcast. Xavier Marin, how are you today?
Hey, Nick, I'm doing well. Jeremy, nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you too, man.
Yeah, of course. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing so good. Martin Luther King Day. Happy Martin Luther King Day, gentlemen. Obviously, this episode won't be out for a little bit, but we can still celebrate nonetheless. So,
I'm celebrating by taking most of the day off. Today, this is the most I have going on today. So,
I love it.
Happy Martin Luther King Day to both of you.
Thank you. Well, we'll start real quick. So we got Xavier on the show, obviously. I actually met Xavier on Instagram through his podcast. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But Xavier, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate investing?
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having me, guys. So kind of brief background. So originally from California. So was born and raised outside of the Bay Area and went to school out in Southern California. Got a degree in business econ. Originally started as a mechanical engineering major, and realized that I was bad at physics. However, I was very stubborn, and until after year 2, I finally decided to make the change. Thankfully, I did. So, went to school down there, and as everyone else, right, went ahead and just got a full-time job right after college. And, growing up, I was always really interested in real estate and wanted to pursue it. I just didn't know how. So, just went the W-2 route. I've been with my company now for about 9 years. I've absolutely loved it. I've relocated from California to Virginia, now here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So it's been great. From a real estate perspective, I really got started out in Virginia house hacking out there. Bought my first home, which was significantly cheaper than California. And that really house hacking really propelled me to really start investing and open my eyes to the possibility of what I can actually do and not only have to rely on my W-2 income to really just live my life.
Perfect. That's a good answer. And just to expand on that a little bit, I think it's awesome that you still have a job. I know that may sound weird coming from the entrepreneur, mindset, but you can do real estate so part-time. You don't need to give up your main job. I mean, I feel like it will keep people grounded. It's a lot easier to qualify for loans. And you could totally do what you're doing on the sidelines with, I don't know how much time you spend investing, but it's probably not more than 20 minutes a day. But anyway, could you expand on that a little bit on what it's like, or if this job is holding you back from doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say that my job has really propelled my real estate journey and my investment. So I think, what I saw that was missing outside, like just really in the real estate world is they always talk about quit your 9 to 5 and just pursue real estate, how to quit your 9 to 5. But not necessarily how do you leverage your 9 to 5 to really build that real estate portfolio? Because thankfully, I'm in a very unique position where I love my W-2. I love what I do. And eventually, yes, I would like to walk away from it, but not anytime soon. And so for me, I was just trying to figure out, hey, what's the best way that I can leverage my W-2 to kind of get that first property? So, I went ahead and actually saved up using my W-2 income to buy my first house hack in Virginia. And house hacking, I was making $600 a month. I got to learn how to be a landlord, got to learn how to be able to screen tenants, how to learn about maintenance, taxes, and all those things. And it also allowed me to tap into a 401k loan to be able to invest out of state as well, right? So that was a tool and resource that I had no idea that I had in my disposal, which really helped me take off and really propel my real estate journey. And I've been able to kind of recycle that process of my 401k loan, which a lot of people don't typically leverage. And I would say I stay pretty busy, right? You're working a full-time job, easily 40 hours a week. I'm salary, so sometimes it can be less, sometimes it could be more. And I'll tell you guys, in the last 9 years, it's always been more. But that's okay. Typically I would wake up early in the morning, either read, go to the gym, work 12 to 14 hours, whatever that shift looks like, come back and read and research, be part of a mastermind. So it's been difficult and it's a challenge. However, it's very rewarding when you have a clear vision at hand of what you're going after.
Right, exactly. And I know a lot of investors that they don't have another job, and they want to try to do this full time, and it is so difficult to do this job full time. Most of the time you're just doing things you shouldn't be doing anyway. And because almost everything's so highly leveraged, like you should be able to have a guy for everything that needs to be done. And for the average investor out there, I mean, this job really should only take 20 minutes of your energy or time a day, if that, right?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely you really just make the best out of it. You have to really figure out like, hey, what you truly want to go after and how much time can you dedicate to it. Because one of the biggest things it's sometimes you try to take a bite of the whole apple, but it's just one bite at a time to kind of going after. If you're someone that has a hard time managing your time or has a very stressful W-2 with a lot of time commitment, and if all you can afford is 20 or 30 minutes a day, that's completely fine. You can kind of chip away at it and start working towards acquiring that first property, just learning more about finance, learning more about how to be able to get that, that first home. So I would say for a lot of people, sometimes they underestimate what they can do with 20 or 30 minutes a day. When you stack that up over a month, over a year, it can make all the difference.
Yeah. So what first got you interested in real estate?
I would say really the biggest thing is I was always just hearing real estate and I was hearing about properties. Just it was something I was just looking up online. I hadn't come across Bigger Pockets. So back in 2015, when I was maybe a year or two into my W-2, I wanted to be an agent out in Southern California. So I really wanted to pursue that path. Um, Started reading the book, started reading like the dummies how to get your real estate agent license. So I was doing that whole thing. And eventually I stopped because I received a promotion for work. So still within Southern California. So that kind of, stopped my trajectory there. And I always regretted not pursuing that from a standpoint of if I would have learned a little bit more about either being an agent and more about the different tools and resources of the first time home buyer. I spent maybe 3 to 4 years after college living in Southern California. If I could have house hacked or know how to house hack for 3 or 4 years and buy a property each of one of those years, we would be having a complete different story here in 2023. Those properties would be worth probably a heck of a lot more. So I would say that really just kind of piqued my interest. And then just over time, I had coworkers that talked to me about Bigger Pockets. And that's when I really just went through the rabbit hole. So got on Bigger Pockets, started listening to all their podcasts, started buying their books. And really that's what helped me kind of get into real estate.
Bigger Pockets is definitely one of those weird gateway drugs where like you just can't get enough of it. Like I went to BPCon last year, I went to BP RookieCon last year, networked and met with all the people, and I'll absolutely do it again in October. Like I'm gonna keep going to those things because there's a lot of value in those events for sure. So
Absolutely. A lot of value in those things, a lot of value in the podcast that you listen to. The biggest thing too is like you can when what I love is when they have guests and now they have different platforms, right? You have the rookie show, you have the OG show, you have on the market, you have so many different things. But earlier on when we didn't have that, when it was just, Brendan Turner and Josh Dorkin, when they're bringing folks on and just kind of hearing their stories of where they got started, it became a little bit more real for me. I was like, hey, I can go ahead and do that too. Why can't I be investing in real estate? And however, it really took me 2 years to get out of the analysis paralysis because I was listening to Bigger Pockets, getting all the books, on the forums, but it took me 2 years to actually get my first deal. So hindsight, I wish it would have been a little bit different. However, I think, at the end of the day, it kind of all works out for a reason.
Right. We live and learn definitely with this stuff. I've only been doing it about a year and a half too, and I wouldn't have even started if it wasn't for Nick here. But yeah, no, it's just cool how everything kind of falls into place the way it needs to happen. So
Yeah. And I think Bigger Pockets was pretty damn amazing. I remember before Bigger Pockets, all I really had as a go-to for like podcasts and stuff, I was an agent. I still am. But I was an agent at Keller Williams Realty, and we had access to this portal for like education. And all it is like interviews with Gary Keller, and he'll talk to you about growing your your real estate agent business and treating it like a business and not like being a self-employed person, but actually growing a team. And then I kind of got obsessed with this gal named Linda McKissick, works out of Texas, and she's all about passive income and has a bunch of rental properties. And then on YouTube, it just like switched over to another Linda McKissick video, and it was her being interviewed on Bigger Pockets. And this is back in 2014, 15 or something like that. But I was like, wait, there's another platform out there where people talk about real estate investing. This is crazy. Anyway, that's my stupid little story about Bigger Pockets, getting involved there. It was a natural transition from the only platform I thought exists.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm the same way, where for years it was just purely Bigger Pockets. To your point, Jeremy, like the gateway drug. That's all I would consume. And really up until last year, I actually started branching out to like listen to other podcasts and attend other conferences, because there's a lot of people out there that are doing great things that are, yes, they're part of the Bigger Pockets community. However, they're having their own conferences. Like, last November, I went to the Jake and Gino MM5 conference. Jake and Gino have been in Bigger Pockets a few times already in their podcast. Great guys, had a great time in the conference. And it just made me realize, like, wow, I mean, I'm going to continue to go to the Bigger Pockets conference every year, because I've gone since Nashville back in 2019. And it just really makes me just want to branch out a little bit more. And then one of my goals this year is to be able to attend at least 4 different conferences.
I love it. So I do want to talk about your house hacking a little bit, Xavier. Are you still currently house hacking then?
I am not. So when I relocated to Minneapolis, I ended up selling my house hack.
Okay.
Hindsight, probably should have done that, because when I was relocating during the time that COVID was pretty much just taking off. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of uncertainty. So what I ended up doing was I got an agent and I sold my house hack, just because I wasn't sure. One, I didn't have my process set in place to be able to manage my rental long distance. And then two, again, I was concerned about the market. So I went ahead and sold. I still made a profit, which was great, but I relocated out in Minneapolis, and I've essentially been renting right now. So I've been renting. However, I've been renting, but still investing every year out of state. And eventually this year, my goal is to be able to get my house hack here in Minneapolis. So I definitely want to make sure I get back into that. But yeah, that during the time for almost a year that I had that house hack, it was a great property. It was a 5-bed, 3-bath property. I bought it for $305,000. So compared to California money, that was super inexpensive for me. And that was great. And really just started with, I was pretty much working 70 hours a week, 60 to 70 hours a week. So I was like, hey, I'm going to buy this house. Why not just rent it by the room? There's a university nearby. There's a naval base nearby. So I would say within like a month or two, I had the whole thing rented out, and I was cash flowing $600. And when I first got when I first got rent, that's when the light bulb clicked. Like, wow, I can still be doing this while working a full-time job. Like, why isn't anyone else doing this?
Nice. So you bought a 5-bedroom house. Did you save any bedrooms for yourself?
I did. So so it was funny, the way that this property was essentially turnkey, and they had 2 masters. So they converted the attic into like one large master, and then there's a second smaller master. So I kept my master because I still wanted at least my own bathroom, obviously bedroom, but everything else I did end up renting out.
Gotcha. So tell us about like how much was the mortgage and how much rents were you receiving? Do you remember?
Yeah, I want to say, so mortgage, I was probably paying somewhere around $1,700 a month. So not terribly, not that expensive. It was really only $300 to $200 more than I was already paying in rent when I was out there. So $1,700 a month. And I believe my monthly mortgage was about $33,050. So after, and because I was house hacking, I was paying for water, gas, internet, essentially all the utilities. And I also furnished everything. And after capex and everything aside, I was cash flowing $600. And I believe like the big masters, I had $1,000. I was renting out for $1,000 a month, and the other bedrooms that were between $750 to $600.
Gotcha. Do you have any nightmare stories at all?
Oh, I would say yes, actually a couple. Unfortunately,
It's bound to happen.
it's bound to happen. I think the first thing I'll start with, it can be very scary at first when you acquire your first property, let alone when you're going to be house hacking, because you're essentially searching for strangers to live in your house with you, right? Managing strangers or managing tenants in different units, it's one thing. Managing them when they're living under the same roof as you, just right next door or like right next to the next room, is a little bit different. But one thing that I recommend for folks is one of the stories that I had was I had someone that was really pressuring me. They wanted to rent one of the rooms really bad, and they wanted from 600 to 400. And this guy was giving me this, large sob story. Hey, really I need a place to live. Can I please live in your place? I will do anything. I will clean, I'll cook, pretty much just trying to get in there. And I hadn't had any rooms rented out just yet. So for me, I was like, oh, should I not? And I talked to my buddy Nick, and he's like, dude, you're literally paying like $200 to $300 more for your mortgage than you were in your rent. Like, you can afford to go another month or two without renting out to this person. And I was like, yes, you're absolutely right. So I said no to that. The upstairs tenant actually ended up moving her boyfriend in during that time. I was like, okay, guys. So I was like, all right, here we go. And there's one thing that my W-2 job has taught me over the years is, one, how to be able to have difficult conversations, right? How to set expectations. And, I spoke to them and I was like, hey, you know what? Based off our lease, you're the only one that signed. There's only one person allowed in here. So we can go two ways. One is, if you guys want to go ahead and leave, you can. You know what? I'll even give you back your security deposit. Or we could add your boyfriend to the lease. I'm going to charge you an extra $200 to take that into account for like utilities and everything else. And you guys can move in. And they're like, oh, sweet. You know what? We'll start paying the extra $200 a month. I'm like, perfect. I'll send you the lease. We'll go ahead and get it signed. So for me, it was, some people tell me like, well, why were you offering a security deposit if they were going to break the lease themselves? Because they're living in the same roof. Last thing I want is for them to be upset to damage anything on their way out. So for me, it's worth it to give them the security deposit back instead of having to worry about potentially damages that's more than a security deposit. And lastly, I would say the biggest thing that really got me concerned was they didn't do the best job with turnkey and doing some rehabs. So within a month or two of having my property, there was water leaking from my ceiling in my bedroom. Yeah. And what ended up happening, they never seated the toilet correctly upstairs. So that water was seeping through, and over time, it caved in, started leaking, got all over my desk, got all over my computer, and had to hire a plumber to, one, they ripped up the drywall just to figure out where it's coming from, notice it was toilet. Two, then get a plumber to go ahead and reseat the toilet. Had to get someone to go ahead and redo the drywall and the painting. And then lastly, there was some freestanding kitchen shelves as well that collapsed over time on a tenant that was living there while they were cooking. They were scared and startled and upset. So I offered them like, hey, I'm so sorry. Here's $40. Go out, buy yourself a pizza. Just, enjoy your night. And he was like, oh, sweet. Okay. He's like, what do you want me to do with this shelf? I'm like, just leave it there. I'll take care of it. So there's definitely a couple of things that happened, owning that property. But nevertheless, it really helped me just get a better understanding of what kind of owner I am, what kind of landlord I want to be, and how to be able to problem solve real time.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I think house hacking is really cool, by the way. The thing that's cool about it, obviously, is you can just use the thing that you have to make money. And it's just, it's always been like the easiest way to get in for me. I haven't done it yet. I still got to get my wife on board a little bit, but you understand. So
Yeah, and I'd say there's definitely different forms to be able to house hack, right? So my example, it's definitely not as appealing. I'm in a relationship right now, and house hacking probably in a huge house would not make sense for how we want to live. However, it doesn't mean that having a duplex, triplex, or a quad like that, you still have your own space. You can always do like an ADU in the back if your property permits it, right? So there's different ways to be able to house like and make money from your property, and it doesn't always have to be just like rent by the room strategy.
Totally. Well, if somebody if that's their only option, if they have to rent by the room, is there anything that you've learned that makes it so much easier? Like, do you label the cabinets like, hey, this is yours, this is yours? The fridge shelves like, hey, this is your shelf. Like, is there anything systematically that you put in place that worked pretty well?
Yep. No, great question, Nick. So I had dedicated shelf space for every individual. That way there was no back and forth of like, hey, you put your stuff in my place, or hey, we don't have enough rooms. Like, hey, you have this a lot of space. Same thing with the pantry. We had a pretty big pantry, so everyone had their allocated room there as well. So it definitely set the expectation off the bat. One of the biggest things that I feel like sometimes people miss is you have to think through and put everything on your lease, right? Because then at the end of the day, if there's a problem, the lease is a bad guy. You're not the bad guy. So you want to make sure you have those clear examples there. And I also had a schedule for when folks wanted to, use the washer and dryer. So there's 5 people living in the house. So there can be a little chaotic at times. So folks agreed like, hey, you know what? I'm typically free on Wednesdays. I'm just going to do my laundries on Wednesdays. Other folks like, hey, I'll take on Monday, whatever. So that way everyone had at least a clear understanding of when their time was to be able to use a washer and dryer. Now things come up and you understand you have to go ahead and wash something. But yeah, little things like that. Pantry, fridge, washer and dryer, and the living room and the kitchen was really pretty much used whenever you wanted to. So I would say like those are the biggest things that I did to kind of set that expectation with my tenants.
And going forward, like, so if you have to house hack anymore, ever obviously, what would you change? Do you have any? Did you have people on midterm leases, like short-term leases? How were your leases looking?
Yeah, so my lease was I set it up as minimum 6 months. So that just allowed me to one be able to see how everything's working out with the guest, or sorry, not that with the guest. I'm thinking short-term rentals. Every- it allowed me to kind of see how individuals were with the tenants, or how everything was with the tenant, how everyone was interacting together. Right? I would say that's my biggest takeaway is that if I was to do something different, if I was renting by the room, I would keep in mind the dynamics of like how everyone's going to coexist together. That's one thing that I completely missed. I did have a couple of folks that were either, I had a lot of people that were in the Navy, some folks that were still in school, and other folks just working just regular jobs. And what you would see is that sometimes the folks from the Navy and that had a regular job would clash a little bit, because they were used to like they had a different lifestyle, they saw things differently. So for me, moving forward, I would essentially like, hey, if I'm gonna house hack again, I'd probably go with like, hey, let's do young professionals perhaps, right? Because everyone's like still, starting off in their career, they're really motivated, they're hungry, they want to go after it, and essentially people that can kind of work with you as well. So I would say that's one thing I kind of overlooked is making sure that people get exactly coexist together, because I found myself having to be the mediator between two individuals every now and then, and that wasn't a good position to be in. I already had to have those coaching conversations at work. I didn't want to have them in my house.
Nice. So you did that for a little while, and then I think you said you ended up selling that property. You bought it in the lower 300s. Do you remember what you sold it for?
Yeah, I ended up selling it for 320.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too bad. And what was really great was that my job actually went ahead and paid for my relocation and the sale of the property. So I actually ended up not paying any taxes on the sale. So I ended up keeping that $15,000, and I was able to go ahead and put that in towards kind of buying my short-term rental out in the Smoky Mountains.
Okay. Well, so when you sold it, did you have to use a real estate agent or anything? Like how were you able to make 15,000 with that kind of spread?
Yeah, so I went ahead and so I hired an agent, right? It was everything through my work, which was great because I relocated with my job. So what they did is that they gave me agents to choose from. The agents were essentially bidding for my property to list. Some agents were like, hey, you've only had this property for almost a year. We can probably get 305 for it. Pretty much just kind of break you even. And another individual's like, hey, you put 17,500 down on this property. Let me see if I can get you most of that back. So he's like, COVID's really weird right now. He's like, but however, people are still buying. You're not probably having a lot of showings because people are not walking into people's homes. He's like, let's just go ahead and start at 320 and see what happens. And I was like, okay, well, I have to be out of here within the next 2 months. a month in, if it doesn't happen, like we're going to reduce the price. Perfect. Brought that agent on, and within a week and a half, I had a offer for 320 under contract with maybe $500 of seller credit, and that was the extent of it. So that worked out perfectly. I got the majority of my down payment back, not including the cash flow that I was already making for almost that year, which is like another $6,000 to $7,000, and not including the tax write-offs too. So all in all, for doing that for almost a year, I got to not only make money, get most of my deposit back for my down payment, but I also gained a lot of knowledge and so much more confidence in myself of like, hey, I can actually do this long term and I can do this with different strategies.
I was gonna say, like, the biggest takeaway sounds like, definitely your experience, and you learned how to be a landlord, and you learned with your boots on the ground, and that's the best thing that your money can honestly buy, and you still get your money back.
And if you were leasing a house, I mean, you would have been throwing $1,700 a month away or so every month for a year. I mean, that's almost 20 grand plus utilities. So sounds like a very thrifty year.
Yeah, I would say I was definitely very fortunate, and there's pros and cons to renting, right? If you're someone that hasn't, either you're not as financially savvy or haven't saved up money to buy your first house, like, renting could be a good option if you're disciplined to be able to save up, right? For me personally, I am renting right now, probably a little bit longer than I probably wanted to. However, there was other external factors that I was looking into, not only just from the financial side, but also I'm a huge fan of the location, huge fan of the apartment complex I'm in. And then also I moved in a very different time here in Minneapolis. It was like just, shortly after the George Floyd murder. So a lot of things were happening around the city, and COVID again was full blast. So I didn't know the city at all. And there was so much going on. I was like, hey, even though I'm probably going to be losing money renting, it's probably the best option for me right now, because last thing I want to do is rush to buy a house for three or $400,000 in the wrong area, not looking for the right numbers, and that can set me back versus renting for 2 years or so.
Yeah. So when you got relocated out to Minneapolis, what was that before or after the George Floyd incident?
So I had signed my acceptance to the position on April 2020, and George Floyd murder happened on Memorial Day weekend the next month after. So I was already locked in and committed to move out here. Hindsight, I'll be honest, if I hadn't already agreed to that, I think my decision would probably be a little bit different just because of the things that were happening around the Twin Cities. However, it's been a great place to live. I definitely enjoyed it so far. I've been out here for 2.5 years. Kind of being part of this community, kind of growing, through that, has definitely been a very unique experience.
Yeah. Well, can you dive in a little further what it was like to move into a city that had nationwide attention? Was it as bad as what everybody seemed it to be? And like what kind of experiences did you have specifically?
Yeah, it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty scary at first. The biggest reason why is maybe within the first week that I moved out here, we were getting those notices to like, hey, there's not necessarily a shutdown. What's a curfew? So like 7 p.m. curfew. We're like, what's happening? Like activity in these areas.
It's like, what am I, 17 again?
Yeah, I was like, what, curfews? Like, are you serious? Okay. And granted, this is in the summer, right? So over here in the summer, it doesn't get like light. The sun's still out until like almost 9 p.m. So like I'm locked into my apartment at 7 p.m. because I can't go outside because of this curfew. Not only that, you have to be very mindful kind of the areas that you're going through, just because there's definitely a lot of crime happening. And just with the difficulty of the pandemic, you had a lot of people that were out of jobs. So like I think crime increased quite a bit as well, carjackings, things of that sort. So I was just very wary about like just my surroundings. And I think what really hit me the hardest was I was not walking, I was driving through, one of the areas that had the biggest impact back in May, which, our Target, burned down out there, which was huge. So I drove by that, burned down buildings, kind of the area where George Floyd was murdered. So
wait, hold on. The actual, like the whole Target building burned down?
So it caught on fire and we had to rebuild that Target store.
Oh, okay. I'm like, Targets are pretty big. It's got to be a massive fire.
It was a massive project. And, one of the things why I love, working for that company is because, within 2 years, they rebuilt the whole thing. right? They were very active in the community. So for them, it was priority to make sure that, that community still had their local Target store there. But yeah, things just got really real. And it's one thing when you're seeing things from a national news perspective, like, wow, you see all these things. And the other thing where you're like, you're seeing this, like, I'm literally going there in the next month. Like, I'm relocating there. But eventually over time, things started to calm down a little bit more. Things started getting a little bit better. And yeah, just one of those things where you just had to be, you just had to be cautious of your surroundings and just be careful. And it was a little bit surreal, but overall, again, I think it's been a great city to live in.
Awesome. And so after your house hack, you decided to take those proceeds and you said you invested into a short-term rental. Is that right?
Yeah, so I took those proceeds, and what I did was, so I sold my house. I had it in my savings for a little bit, and then I was able to cash out refi my out-of-state property just outside of Nashville.
Nice.
And I was able to get the majority of my down payment back from that as well. So that is when I went ahead and acquired my short-term rental out in the Smoky Mountains. So pretty much the proceeds, pretty much my down payment for my first house and second house, I put towards my third house, which was really great. So I would say, very limited money up front to acquire that, especially with the 10% down loan. It worked out great for us.
Real quick, the Smoky Mountains. So embarrassingly, we talked about this just before the podcast. I thought the Smoky Mountains were somewhere around Lake Tahoe in California. And I don't know why everybody's investing in California, and this is how stupid I am. But just realizing now the Smoky Mountains are somewhere in Tennessee. Can you tell us a little bit about that area and why does it make you nervous at all that there's so much attention in the investor community on short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains? Like, how large is this area? And is there still more room for more short-term rentals, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say the area itself. So it's the Smoky Mountains, a national park. It's the most visited national park in the country. So there's definitely a huge attraction there. And I believe that it's within maybe, 75 or 80% of the United States is within 300 miles of driving distance to the Smoky Mountains. And I think that's what makes it very popular. It's definitely been pretty saturated over the past couple of years because I feel like it's kind of how it works where someone mentions a location out on the podcast, like, hey, I'm investing in Joshua Tree. Like, for example, I remember, hearing Tony Robinson say, like, hey, I'm investing in Joshua Tree. And I'm just hearing everyone just gravitating towards Joshua Tree, or, hey, I'm investing in the Smoky Mountains. Like, everyone just starts moving to where like everyone's going. So we did see that prices were going up quite a bit. Thankfully, I was able to secure my two properties just before that bubble really kind of took off in the peak. However, I would say that there's still a lot of construction going on right now. So what you're seeing is they're just building out. They're building outside of Pigeon Forge. They're building outside of Gatlinburg. So it's still a very, popular destination. People are still going. You're not near 2020, 2021 number just because during that time, there's a lot of people that really wanted to get out and travel. So, it's still a really strong market to invest in. It really just depends on, how you're able to acquire that cabin or that property, whether it's a 20% down loan, 15, 10, and what kind of strategies you're using along with the purchase price that really can make or break whether or not it's a good deal for you.
Awesome. What kind of loans are you getting at 10% right now, by the way?
So to acquire that short-term rental, I used a second home loan, which required 10% down. So that's how I acquired that. I haven't seen any other loans that could get you 10% down that isn't a second home loan. There might be some portfolio loans out there that may require that, and I'm not absolutely sure. The luxury for me was that out-of-state property in Nashville, I was actually able to get it at 50% down conventional, which was great. My primary in Virginia, 5% down conventional, and then the second home loan for that, for that cabin was 10% down. Unfortunately, I was not able to use a second home loan for the second cabin because there is a restriction there. I believe you can't be using two second home loans in the same market because technically it's a vacation home. Like, why in the heck would you want to have two houses in the same vacation home? Which makes sense. So then from there, I just went ahead and used like a 15% down strategy.
Yeah, that'd be called a third home loan. Second home
They're going to
loan.
start questioning how many homes you have.
Yeah, but just for the listeners out there, I have experience with this too. Second home loans, there's a second home loan product out there that's really awesome. That so it's only 10% down. I can't remember if it's a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac program, but you're going to get a prime interest rate. And a little tip, if you are a real estate agent, I was able to do this. I got a great deal on a cabin out in Kellogg. It's about 50 miles from me, a little ski town. But I was able to negotiate as an agent. I asked for a 10% commission on the buyer's end, and I asked for 3% closing cost. So essentially, I got into it with like nothing down, because I did have to come up with the 10%, but the same day I got paid for my broker that 10%. So it's a phenomenal loan program out there for investments on vacation rentals. You can get one.
Everybody gets one. That's what they say. Can you tell us about one of your properties out there? So obviously it is your second home. Have you actually ever been out there to visit it, or is it all completely remote?
Yeah, so I do all the management remote. However, I was just out there last weekend, and we were just went ahead and wrapped up the peak season of the holidays, so Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year. So typically every year I like to go out there after that and just kind of assess the properties. How's everything looking from the interior perspective, exterior? I'm taking a look at also the reviews that we had. Sometimes we get really great reviews. Sometimes we get some feedback off to the side of like, hey, some things that we can improve. So I typically do go out there and visit my property. And that's one of the things that there is like a speculation on there for the second home loan. It's like, hey, you have to be able to actually use it as a vacation home. It doesn't specify the amount, but I probably visit my cabins maybe 2 to 3 times a year, depending on that, just to make sure like, everything's set up correctly, everything's going well. And my goal this year is to go truly visit it as like, hey, I'm going to do very little work with cabin management in general and actually go enjoy the area. But I got to say, I'm not someone that has ever had Texas Roadhouse or Crackle Barrel, and there's plenty of it in the Smoky Mountains, and I absolutely love it because that's all I ate this past weekend.
There you go. What kind of cash flow are you making on those properties, by the way?
Yeah, I would say in terms of revenue that I've made this past year with my partner, so one of my cabins, revenue about $70,000, and another cabin was about $60,000 for the year. So a little bit lower than the previous years, which again, it's fine. I would say overall cash flow, I don't have that amount at hand, but I'm averaging anywhere between 20 to 30% cash on cash return on those cabins. There's some months like in the summer and then the holidays that you're absolutely crushing it. And right now, January, February, even March, it dies down quite a bit. So you kind of have to do this balance where you don't want to completely maximize your cash flows during your peak seasons, because you want to set some more reserves off to the side to accommodate for the lower seasons.
Kind of sounds like the market up here a little bit, right, Nick?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. In the Coeur d'Alene market, phenomenal summer. I mean, you can make a year's worth of income, like from pretty much May to September, but then it is quiet, very, very quiet until the end of next spring.
All right, and then so I did want to talk about you. Obviously, you do have a partner on one of your deals. You guys are working on getting a hotel, motel, resort. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. So partner and I, he's pretty big in the short-term rental. So I work alongside with Tony Robinson, and so I'm working with him to try to acquire hotels, motels, resorts, in kind of like destination areas for vacations. And the strategy behind that is because the proven model is already there for short-term rentals, single family. Now, can you go ahead and build on top of that with hotels, motels? You can essentially take the same tools and resource and approach that you do with a single family house and apply it to hotels and motels and resorts. And we're really looking for unique stays, right? So, and we haven't gotten anything under contract just yet. Like, we're still continuing to do our due diligence, do our research. And I would say the underwriting and just the deal analysis for the commercial side is definitely a little bit different from acquiring a short-term rental or single family house, because one thing is similar for sure is that the seller has their own idea of what their property is worth, versus when you actually run the numbers. What are the ADRs, like your average daily rates? What is the NOI on that property? It definitely doesn't justify the cost. So I would say we've had a lot of conversations. We've had a lot of negotiations back and forth. But eventually we're going to get one. But yeah, that's our goal for 2023, is to be able to at least knock down a couple of those this year.
So what's it like getting to work side by side with like a guy who's on the biggest podcast ever?
It's great, man. It's so Tony and I actually worked together back in our W-2 in California. So him and I go back for a couple of years. So I've known him even before he started investing in real estate. So I think him and I have a really close connection there. But it's really great to just kind of see his thought process, like his business, how it's grown over the past 3 years. And then also too, I think you learn a lot from from him and Sarah and like their approach and how they go about things. So it's great. A lot of people are like, "Oh my God, it's Tony! Oh my God, it's Sarah!" Like these these major figures in bigger pockets, which they are. And for me, it's just like, hey, Tony and Sarah, these are guys that I met years ago, back when we weren't investing. We were going out and like, having a drink or two, back in the day. So I'd say it's been really great, and it's also been great to just kind of see their progress over the past couple of years and how they've been able to kind of expand and build their business.
hmm What's really cool about them and anyone like I've met that's kind of a star status in the investing world is they're all human people. They're all just like legitimate people making cool things. They're super approachable. They're super knowledgeable. They're super friendly. Like you can walk up and talk to them and they'll just engage in a conversation with you. And it's so great just having those kind of mentors and those kind of friends in this industry for sure.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like for folks, sometimes you have people that are like, hey, like you follow them on TikTok, you follow them on YouTube and IG, and you're like, are these people really the way that they are like here in person? 100%. Like, they're very outgoing. They're very, Tony's more cool, calm, collected. Sarah's definitely, she brings the fire and the passion there. So you're definitely like what you see on IG and social media is what you're gonna get. So yeah, they've been great people to work with.
That's awesome. And you said your goal in 2023 is obviously the hotel motels. What's your 5-year plan after that? So obviously you're going to break into the commercial sphere a little bit. What's going to be your kind of end game after that?
Yeah, so I would say a few things, and I try to simplify it for myself just because I want to give myself the opportunity to kind of make some adjustments as needed. I don't want to be kind of set on one thing. From a personal standpoint, I'll be honest. One is when I take a look at like kind of where I'm at personally in my life. Obviously 5 years from now, it'd be great for me to kind of be married, have kids, and kind of just work on that family life eventually over time. I want to be able to have completed a half Ironman. And that's very big for me because I'm trying to get back into being in better shape, just being a better person overall. From a business perspective, I want to be able to have a house in San Diego. So my co-host lives in San Diego. I absolutely love it. I'd go down drinking every other week out in Southern California. I was in college and I just fell in love with the city. So I'd love to have a place down there. I'd like to be able to say that I've become a millionaire within the next 5 years. So I'm kind of working towards that piece as well. And then lastly, I want to be able to have about $250,000 a year towards my real estate business, right? So I would like to be cash flowing 250 a year in the next 5 years. It's kind of my overall goal. And the reason why that's kind of broad, like, hey, 250, like why? One, I think that's kind of like that'd be my best like financially free number where I wouldn't have to worry about essentially anything anymore. But also there might be avenues where I'm like, hey, I want to get that number through commercial real estate. I want to get that number through, just short-term rentals, single family rentals, wholesaling. And I recently joined a mastermind, Pace Morby's mastermind sub two,
Nice. Okay.
where I'm really going to be going after that. And hopefully a lot of my portfolio ends up being sub two. So I'm just kind of keeping that a little bit open because there's a lot of different strategies that I plan on utilizing for getting to that 250 a year.
Awesome. And I know you're a huge W-2 advocate. What number? So when do you plan on quitting your job? Obviously, we're not going to go run and tell Target or anything like that. But do you have an idea of your time frame of how long you'd like to be legit employed?
Good question. I've thought about this back and forth. I would say that I would anywhere between probably the next 3 to 5 years would be kind of my timeline. But again, it really just depends on how everything's going. Am I able to have really great processes in my business with real estate and I'm able to maintain my W-2? There's really no reason for me to truly try to quit, right? Because I have those processes down, everything's running smooth. That'd be great. Now, I would love to be in a position where it's like, hey, business is great. There's so many things happening that in order for me to truly grow and expand and really take this off, like I'd have to leave my W-2, then I'd absolutely do it. But if you gave me like, hey, which year would you be like, hey, really start thinking about it seriously, would be maybe 2026.
And I know you spoke just a little bit on Ironman. I want to plug Nick real quick. Nick did a half Ironman this year, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Last year. I just, if I can give you any advice, I would say just do it. Keep paddling and keep pedaling and keep jogging, and you'll finish it. It's just like anything else, and it's so funny how it's just like the business world. I mean, if you're unprepared for it, you're probably going to suck. But you really don't need to prep as much as most people think. You just need to be consistent about just doing a little bit at a time, here and there, to just kind of get your build up your adrenaline a little bit. But you don't need to overdo it with the working out. You just need to keep going when it's time for the actual race day, because your body can do a lot more than you think it can. Most people, just like what's his name, David Goggins, say, most people quit at 40%, and you have a lot more gas in the tank than most people think. So
David Goggins is also a freak of nature, by the way. So
yeah.
His story's insane. I read his book. He's not human. Like,
Dude, it was such a good book. It was pretty graphic here and there, but yeah, he's on another level when it comes to toughness.
it's funny, I follow him on social media and everything, so I'll go see a David Goggins video and he's like, "You suck, you're a terrible person." And I'm like, "I need some Mel Robbins. I need to kind of counteract this for a second here."
Yeah.
yeah, and that's good to know, Nick, because I hate running. And when I say I hate running, I absolutely, like, I'm 260 pounds, 6'4". Like, I'm a big dude. Big dudes don't run. However, that's the reason also why I'm doing it. So I ran a half marathon last year in San Diego that I had to train for. Unfortunately, it had to be the majority treadmill because in Minneapolis, it's always snowing and raining. It's below 30. Like, you're not going to want to run in that condition. So I ran in San Diego, and it was a great time. But I'll tell you, it's like, I'm conflicted because when you finished it, it was very rewarding. But the process to get there in training and during, it just sucked. Like, it wasn't fun. However, because I don't enjoy it that much, I really want to see how much my body can, like, what's capable of doing, which is why I'm gonna go after, eventually an Ironman. So this year I'm gonna be doing another half marathon. I'm gonna try to do the equivalent of half marathon for biking and also swimming as well, just to kind of put my body to the test. Like, hey, can it actually handle doing all these three things at once? We'll find out.
You'd be surprised, man. There's a lot of big people that do these races, and it's shocking how well they maybe not keep up, but they just keep going because you have a lot more gas in the tank than a lot of these skinny guys. And when it comes to floating in the water, you don't have to work as hard as some of these skinny guys because they're trying not to drown. You can float, The biking might be tough, but you know what? There's gears for that. Yeah, and then when you're running the 13 miles, as long as you're just, you can walk. As long as you do it in time, you have so much glycogen stored up in your system, more than most people as a bigger person, where you actually have a bigger advantage than you'd think. So just build up your endurance.
Actively working on that now.
I love it. And real quick, Xavier, I do want to talk about your guys' podcast as well. So again, I found you on Instagram. W2 Amigos is what it's called, correct?
W2 Amigos.
I love it. So, and I love your mission, basically. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I want to talk about how interesting it is for exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and just a little bit of backstory, like why we came up with W2 Amigos. So I'm Mexican. Nick is not, but he married someone that's Latina. So I'm like, hey, you pretty much are Mexican. I'm like, we're friends, Amigo sounds good. It's about W2 investing. How about W2 Amigos? That's essentially was our whole thought process. It wasn't that that complicated there. But one of the things that Nick and I were talking about was throughout our real estate journey the past couple of years, we've always heard how to quit your 9 to 5 to pursue real estate. Do these things to quit your 9 to 5. But we rarely heard about people, how do you leverage your 9 to 5 to establish your financial freedom, right? Or very rarely would you hear about people, oh, I love my job and this is what I'm doing to, kind of go for my next rental. So we're like, hey, we might have something here. We're both W2 employees. We're both are investing. He's our real estate agent. And we're like, hey, I think we have something to provide here to the community where for folks that are either looking to get started but don't know how and actually like their job, like where do they start? How can they hear stories about people that might be in a very similar space as they are? Or there might be people that don't like their job and still want to get out of the rat race. Okay, how can you strategically leverage your job to put yourself in a position to do that? So we just saw a very big market and an opportunity there, and that's kind of how we went about our starting our podcast journey.
That's awesome. How long have you been doing it, by the way?
We went live in October, so we are about just shy of 3 months in, I think. So 3 months in, we're approaching 2,000 downloads, which is great. So I think it's definitely we were going to be happy with 300 by the end of the year. I'll be
Sure.
honest with you. We're like, hey, if we could just have 100 downloads a month, that'd be great. But thankfully, it sounds like it's been resonating with people. People are interested to see the guests that we're bringing on, the topics that we're talking about as well. So thankfully, it's been going well. And for 2023, we're really hoping to be able to. Our goal is to get to 10,000 downloads and grow social media following as well. But we'll see how that goes.
It's good. As long as you guys are staying consistent, I see no reason why you're not going to grow. Plus, you're getting really cool guests with really interesting stories. So it's kind of a win-win. I love to tell people that like podcasting is its own self-feeding funnel, right? So you get the people interested, you get the guests on, the guests share your show, they get their friends on, and then you just start weaving and finding your way with it.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, what we told ourselves, like if it didn't take off, like that's still 2 to 4 hours a week that I get to spend recording and talk to my best friends. Like, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, there's really no lose here.
Sure. Anything you want to add on that, Nick?
No, I think it's awesome what you're doing. Just stick with it. Be consistent. That's one thing I wish I was consistent so I started my podcast in the start of 2020, just before the pandemic, and we ran it pretty strong for at least I want to say 1 year. Had 30 something episodes, and then I took some time off just because I got busy and hung up with other things, and I didn't realize until like maybe 16 months into it or so, I started all these conversations I would have with people. They started referring back to my podcast about certain guests that they heard, and I'm like, wait, people are actually listening to that thing? And I finally went back and I'm like, oh wow, there's actually a lot more people that downloaded it than I thought, because I the only views I look at are on YouTube, and when each one only has 100 views, I'm like, it's not getting much activity. But still, that's it's amazing. It just has these long-term residual effects, and I can go back today and still they're out there, and the numbers just keep growing, and they will start to fall off a cliff unless you actually consistently keep pushing out new content and new stuff. But it's absolutely worth it. It has large residual effects, and it's also a great way to just stay sharp and be on top of things, having a conversation, learning how to actually communicate, because this is the job of an investor is to talk to people. And if you kind of force yourself to do it once or twice a week on a podcast, it's just gonna sharpen your skills, because you're gonna learn from other people. And I don't really see any downfall to it.
I 100% agree. I think having a podcast has really challenged me to make sure that one, it kind of helps with teaching things back, right? So I feel like you continue to learn that way. Secondly, it forces you to continue to do research on the topics that you want to talk about, because you might think that not necessarily know everything, but you know a good amount. But if you're going to put it out there, you want to make sure that you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's. And I had the opportunity where my partner, another partner of mine that we have our cabins with, he has his own mastermind, and he brought me on as a real estate coach to help with his students there. And at first I was kind of thinking like, hey, does that make sense for me? Something I want to do. But over time I was thinking like, hey, I'm someone that wants to continue to grow my knowledge. I want to help others. What better way than teaching others that I wanted to get started in real estate to do it? Because at the end of the day, you're kind of just, sharpening that tool over and over again by showing others. Because you might think like you're not too far off. Because for me, I would say that I'm not a rookie, but I'm definitely not a veteran either. However, I still have the ability, even though I've been in the game for about 3 to 4 years, I still have the ability to help out someone that is barely just getting started, and hopefully, help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I went through during my real estate journey.
That's awesome. It's definitely a team sport in real estate, so we all have to win together for sure. We are going to start winding down here, if that's okay with you, Nick. We're getting close to the hour mark. Do you want to add anything before we start going into the final questions, Nick?
Yeah, Xavier, do you have a big dog in your room?
Do you hear it snoring?
Yes, I do.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I hope it's not that bad.
It's all good.
I've been
No, it's not too bad. I was just guessing. I'm like, you must have a one of those big, what kind of dog do you have?
she's a pit bull. She's a 2-year-old pit bull.
I knew it, Pitbull. I can tell by the snore.
She's a 2-year pit bull. She's like, so my girlfriend left out of town for work, and she's been laying on her pillow all morning. And I've been like throwing things at her so she would stop snoring, and she's just a deep sleeper.
She's just such a tired girl. It's okay.
Yeah, we ended up adopting her about 3 months ago. So she's a rescue from Hurricane Ian. Unfortunately, she was displaced during that hurricane. So she's a Florida gal that having to adapt to the Minnesota winter. So that's been interesting. But yeah, my apologies. I've been trying to keep her on the low key here, but it hasn't been working.
Nick, your hearing must be impeccable. I can't hear anything other than you guys talking, so that's great.
No, I know my snores. That's all.
You know your dog snores, that's for sure.
I know my dog snores.
If there's any takeaways here, it's know your dog snores. Nick Beveridge, that's the quote. So
Yeah. Well, thank you, Xavier, for being on. I really appreciate it. We're gonna wind down with a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this up.
So I just got a few questions to ask you, Xavier. So if you had one business or investing book you recommend every single person read, what would that be?
Ooh, can I give a business and a non-business answer?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
I really like Rocket Fuel. I think that book was great and very important to my development as just overall individual that wants to be an entrepreneur, that is an entrepreneur. Understanding the difference between, are you a visionary, are you an integrator, or are you a little bit of both, and like what's really your passion behind what you want to do. So when I read that book, when I went through kind of the questionnaires, that's when I realized that I was more of an integrator. I love doing things, getting stuff done. I have a little bit of visionary in me. However, that book was great for me, and it really provided a clear path to like what I will go after, and just making sure that I'm doubling down on my strengths. In terms of non-business related book, I love Atomic Habits. I think that book is absolutely great. I'm sure you guys have already read it as well too. So I love the teachings behind it, and just making sure that, you talk about, getting better, just, 1% more a day, reading 20 minutes a day, like over time that can make huge improvements. So same thing with your habits. So I would say those are my two top books that I'd recommend for folks.
Perfect. Good answer.
That's awesome. Actually, I just purchased Rocket Fuel. I haven't read it yet, but I did just get it. So that is on the docket coming up for sure. So
Jeremy, I'll sum it up for you. Some people are visionaries, some are integrators. If you're one or the other, find a partner that's the other one, and you're fine.
I'm still going to read it.
Okay.
All right. So next question, Xavier. If you were given $30 million just gifted to you in your bank account, what's the first thing you would spend it on?
I would pay off my parents' home. So that's one of my goals that I have is, making sure that, my parents came to this country, 38 years ago. And I would definitely love to kind of pay that back with them with paying off their home.
Awesome. That's a good answer. I love that.
Good answer.
What advice would you give to newer investors looking to get started with their, first, second, or third deal?
I would say networking and talking to other investors is going to be key. I think, for me personally, when I first started off, I thought that I had to do it alone. I thought that my problems were unique. I thought that no one else was going through what I was going through. And once you start talking to other people, you realize people have that same mindset as well. People sometimes have the same fear as you do. So really being a part of that community, talking to other folks, getting a mentor, joining a mastermind, being part of conferences, I think really help folks with getting their first deal and continue to get several deals. You just have to break through that mental barrier, thinking that you're the only one that has that problem and you're the only one that struggles with this. You're not. There's hundreds, if not thousands of people that are currently struggling with what you're struggling right now.
Awesome. One more question for you real quick. How would you define success?
Ooh, good question. The way that I would define this, I would say, what does success mean for you? What kind of life do you want to live? It's very easy nowadays to get caught up of like seeing successful people on Instagram. That's their own definition of success, right? So for me, it's if I'm able to have a roof over my table, a roof over my head, not table. Sorry about that.
Both probably, right?
Yeah.
Both work.
But both do work. If I'm able to be in a position where I can support, and help my family when things come up, help my siblings, through college or whatever that may be, and really give back to others, that for me, that's the success. So that's how I would define success for folks. I was like, hey, what does it mean for you to be successful? Because at the end of the day, there's different levels and different definitions of success. It's all about what you make out of it or what you want in your life.
Awesome. I do just have one actual quick bonus question here. If you're not working, you're not investing, how are you spending your free time?
Oh, not working, not investing, how I'm spending my free time. So I would say, my girlfriend and I definitely like exploring the Twin Cities out here in Minneapolis. So whenever we get a chance to go out to some breweries, kind of explore a little bit. We are kind of big fans of like, trying to watch some shows. So for me, when I'm not, working all these hours, I'd like to disconnect for a little bit. Or not say I like, I have to disconnect. And one way to do that is by just watching a couple of shows. Like we just finished through Modern Family, the entire series, and like that show is hilarious. And also, in the summers I love to golf, so my buddies and I will go out golfing out here. So that's like one of those pastimes I enjoy doing.
All right. Well, tell you what we'll do, Xavier. We're going to ask you, where can people find more about you?
Absolutely. So folks can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Xavier Marin _. And you guys can also find the W2 Amigos podcast on Instagram and TikTok at the W2 Amigos. That's where you guys can find us.
Awesome. Beautiful. Do you have any closing thoughts for us, Xavier?
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been great to be on and talking to you guys a little bit more. And I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully one day having you guys on our podcast as well.
Yeah, man, let's make it happen. Whenever you guys want to do it, let's do it. So Nick is the host right now, but what we're gonna do, it looks like he shut out. We are still recording, so we're just gonna go ahead and say thanks everybody for joining. Xavier, appreciate your time, man, and it's been great. We'll catch up soon, okay?
Sounds good. Have a good one, Jeremy. Thanks.
Thank you so much for checking out the Investor Shed podcast. If you enjoyed your time, make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow along on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at The Investor Shed for shorts and promos about each episode. Do you want to be a guest or know someone who has great real estate investing advice and stories? Reach out to us at theinvestorshed@gmail.com.